What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to another edition of Coding with Robbie. As always, I'm your host, Robbie, and in today's video, we're going to build a full authentication system in NextJS. We're going to be using JWT. We're going to be using NextJS server actions. We're going to be using HTTP only cookies. We're going to be using Prisma as our database ORM. And check it out. Here's what we're going to build. So we got a login page here. We can put incorrect details and get an error message. We got a sign up page where we can sign up, and the same thing, we'll get error messages if our password or email doesn't meet the criteria. And we can log in and we'll get redirected to this protected page that you can only see when you're logged in. So I can refresh and see it. If I go to the home page, we see this dashboard here, and if I log out, it's going to change based on whether I'm logged in or logged out. And then if I try to go back to protected, well, I can't access it anymore, and it boots me out and sends me to login. And here's the coolest part. Since we're using NextJS server actions, it's actually going to work without JavaScript. So we can disable JavaScript entirely, and we still got a working login system. So if that sounds good, make sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment, and we'll get right into it. Let's go. All right, so let's kick things off by setting up our NextJS app and all the dependencies we're going to use. So I got the NextJS installation page pulled up right here. It'll be linked in the description. You're just going to need Node.js version 18 or better and basically any operating system. And then they give us the command to create an app right here. So let's copy that and we'll go to our terminal. We're just going to cd to where we want to place it and then run the command. And this is going to ask you a few questions. I'll name my app JWT. I'll use TypeScript, no ESLint, no Tailwind. I will use the source directory and app router, and I won't customize the alias. So once you go through that, it's going to generate the app. And once it's done, we can cd into the folder and open it with VS Code. So here's all the files they start us out with, and then we can run our app with npm run dev. And this is going to start it up on localhost 3000. So let's actually try this out and make sure it works. And there we go, we're running Next.js. So now we're going to add our database, and I'll be using Prisma to interact with databases. So Prisma is pretty much the top ORM for Node.js. It's got 36K stars and a ton of people using it, and it's really good. I'd recommend it. But I got the quick start guide right here, so I'll link this in the description also. And to get started, we just got to install these dependencies. So let's copy this command. I'll open up a new terminal tab, and I'm still within the project folder, and I'll run the command. And this is gonna get all the stuff we're gonna need. If we come down, it says to initialize TypeScript, but Next.js actually did that already, so I'll skip this command. And I'll come down to this one where we install another dependency. So let's get that. And then we can initialize Prisma with this command right here. So let's copy it, go to terminal, paste it, and then this last part is where we put what kind of database we're gonna be using. So I'll be using Postgres, and we'll run that, and it's actually gonna create a Prisma folder with a schema file in it, and it's going to create a .env file where we place our database URL. So let's get started by updating that URL. Let's go to VS Code, we'll go to the .env, and then we'll just change this to whatever our database URL is. So I'm running Postgres locally, but just put whatever your database credentials are in here. So I'll name my database JWT and save that. And then one additional thing you'll want to do is just add this to your git ignore. So let's go to git ignore, and I'll just add .env down here and save it. And let's go back to the instructions now. So the next thing we got to do is model our data. So let's actually copy this user model right here, and we'll go to our Prisma/schema file, and let's just paste it at the bottom. And let's modify this. So we'll keep the ID, we'll keep the email, but instead of name, ours is going to have a password, and it's not going to be optional. So I'll get rid of that question mark. And then we're not going to have posts, so I'll delete that. And let's save it. And now there's a couple other steps we got to do. So let's go back here. We're not going to pull our database. We're actually going to push it in a second. But before we do that, let's generate a Prisma client. So let's copy this command, and we'll go npx Prisma generate. And this is just going to create a Prisma client that we can import and then use to modify our database. So we just created the client. Now there's one other thing we got to do. So this is another documentation page I'll pull up. I'll link up. But this is basically how you use the client in Next.js. So if we scroll down, they give us some code right here. And we're going to place this in lib/prisma. So let's create that. So I'll put it in the app folder. I'll do a new folder called lib, and then within there, I'll do a file called prisma.ts, paste it in. TypeScript's gonna complain, I'm just gonna ignore it in this file. So let's go @ts, no check. And there we go, we got our client set up for Next.js, and now the last thing we have to do is just push our database so it actually syncs our models and stuff with the real database. And to do that, it's npx prisma db push, and this is going to create our database and sync it. So it says it's done, so we can verify that real quick. So I use an app called Table Plus. It lets me view databases, and we can see right here we got the users table with ID, email, and password. So we got our database set up now, so we're just gonna have a couple more dependencies. So we're gonna be using bcrypt.js, and this is used for hashing passwords and comparing them. So let's go ahead and grab this. So let's go npm install bcrypt.js. And then this is not a TypeScript package, so we'll get the types also. So npm install -- save dev, and we want @types/bcrypt.js. And there we go. And the last dependency is going to be this one called Jose, which lets you encrypt and decrypt JWT tokens. So we can get that with npm install Jose. And this one is TypeScript, so we don't have to do anything additional. And then just one thing to note is this is not the most popular JWT package. So that would be JSON Web Token. But this one doesn't work within Next.js for some reason. It uses some node module it can't import. So we'll be using this one, which is also pretty good. All right, so now we're going to create all the pages and API routes we're going to need. So before we do that, let's go into VS Code and let's just kind of clear out some of the stuff we're not going to use. So I don't care about the favicon or any of the CSS they start us out with, so I'm going to delete all that. And then I'll go within page.tsx, and all this content, I'm just going to delete it and replace it with a h1 tag that just says homepage. And then we can delete these imports at the top. And then let's go to layout.tsx, and I don't care about the font or the CSS, so I'll delete that. I'll leave the metadata, but I do have to delete this class down here. And there we go, we kind of cleared out all the stuff they start us with. So now let's create some new pages. So let's create a folder called signup, and within there we'll create a file called page.tsx. And then let's go to this page.tsx in the root and just copy it into signup. We'll rename this to sign up, and then we'll wrap everything in a div and make the h1 say sign up. And then we're going to need a form in here, so let's create a form. And our form is going to have an input type email with name email. And then we're going to need a password field, so let's copy that and just change it to say password. So type password, name password. And then we're going to need a submit button. So let's go button type is equal to submit, and inside there we'll just put sign up. So that looks pretty good for sign up. So now let's do login. We'll create another folder called login. Within there we'll create page.tsx, and then let's just copy everything over from sign up, and we'll just change it so everything says login instead of sign up. And then let's create a third page called protected. So let's create protected and page.tsx within there. And then in here, we'll just have an h1 that says protected. And there we go, we got our 3 pages. So let's actually try this out in the browser. So we'll go back. So I got /login, I got /signup, and I got /protected. So now let's create a couple API routes real quick. So to do that, we're going to use route handlers. So you basically just create a route.ts file within the app directory. So we'll nest all our API routes in a folder called API. And within there, we're going to have sign up and log in. And then each one of those is going to have a route.ts file. And then if we go back to the documentation, you can see that in these files, we can put different methods. So there's get, post, patch, delete, and update. No, it's not update. Why did I call it update? What is it? Get, post, put, patch, and delete. There we go. So in our case, we're going to be sending in data. So we're going to want a post request. So we can just copy the example right here. paste it in, and we'll just clear out everything except for the last line where we respond, and we'll just respond with an empty object. And we'll copy this and put it in both files. And there we go. We set up our pages, we set up some API routes, and now we're going to hook everything up. All right, so now we're going to build our sign up API route. So I got the file pulled up right here, and let's just kind of map out what we're going to do. So first up, we got to read data off request body. And then we want to validate the data. And then we want to hash the password. And then create a user in DB. And then we want to return something. All right, so this first part, how do we get data off this request? Well, if we go back to the documentation, the first argument this is going to get is this guy right here. So we can just paste that in. And this is going to be sent in JSON, so we just have to go await request.json. And this will be the response body, so we can assign that to a variable. And then we'll actually get the email and password off of it. So let's go email and password, and we'll get that off of body. Now we got to validate the data, so we want to make sure it's a valid email and that the password meets our requirements. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I think this is a good task for ChatGPT, so let's do it over here. Let's go write me a function in JavaScript to validate a password and an email address. So we'll let this run. It's going to create it for us. So here's our validate email function. Let's copy that. And let's just make a new folder in here called helpers. And you got to spell it right. And then within here, I'll create a new file called validate email.ts. Paste it in. This is going to be a string. And then we'll export default this. And then let's create another one called validate password. And let's see what it wrote for us. This looks pretty good. Let's copy it and export default it and specify that this is a string. All right, so let's see, minimum 8 characters, 1 uppercase, 1 lowercase, 1 number, and 1 special character. So that's pretty good. So let's go back here, and now we're going to validate the data. So let's go if no valid email, and we'll pass in the email. Or if there's not a valid password, and we'll pass in the password. And then if one of those is incorrect, we got to return an error. So let's copy this. And inside the JSON, we'll go error. And we'll just go invalid email or password. And then we're going to add a second argument to this where we can specify the status, and let's make this a 400 error. So there we go, that's a good error. And now we got to come down here. If that does validate, we need to hash the password. And we installed bcrypt.js to do this. And if we scroll down a little bit, they show us an example right here. Auto gen a salt and hash. So let's copy it. And we'll go right here. We'll make this a const. We got to import the bcrypt library. So let's go up here. We'll go import bcrypt from bcrypt.js. And then instead of hashing bacon, we're actually going to put in the password they sent in. So let's go password, and we'll just leave that as is. And now we have our hashed password, and now we got to create a user in the database. So we're going to use that Prisma client we created right here. So let's go Prisma. It's going to suggest the import. We're going to go .user, and then we're creating a user. So .create. This gets an object which has a key data. We just pass in the data. So we're going to do the email they sent in. And then for password, we're going to use the hashed version that we created. So hash. And now this needs to be awaited on. And then if this is successful, we can just send the 200 back. So we don't even have to send any data or do anything there. So that looks pretty good. All right, so now we're going to hook this up to our sign up page. So let's go to the page.tsx for sign up. And then to hook this up, we're going to be using NextJS server actions. This is a new way to do it. It's going to run it server side, and it's pretty cool actually. But to use these, you basically just add this use server thing to your function, and then you can connect it to forms and stuff. So let's copy this. We'll go to our page and we'll create one up top here, and I'll rename it to sign up. And then let's just map out what we got to do in here. So first we got to get data off form, and then send to our API route, and then redirect to login if successful. All right, so how do we get data off the form? Well, the first argument this is going to receive is form data of type form data. And then to get a field off of this, you just go form data.get, and then you put the name of the field you want to get. So ours is email and password. Let's go email, and we'll assign this to a variable called email. And then we'll do the same thing for password. Change that to password. All right, we got our fields, and now we got to send it to our API route. So to do that, we'll use the fetch API. And I always forget how to do it. I have to look it up on Stack Overflow, but here's an example. So let's copy this. We'll paste it in. I'll change this just to res. And then we put our URL right here. So ours is going to be http://localhost 3000/API/signup. And then we're going to have a problem. So when we deploy this, we don't want it going to localhost. So we should actually move this to an environment variable. So let's cut it out, and we'll go to our .env file, and you're just going to put root URL is equal to, and then we'll do localhost. So now let's go back and we can use that. So let's go process.env.root URL plus the route, so API/signup. So that looks pretty good. Coming down, it's going to be a post request. I don't care about this accept header, but I do want this content type application/JSON. And then we just put the body down here. So instead of A and B, we're going to do our email and password, which is the data that they entered in here. And then down here is where we convert the response into JSON. So let's change that to res, and we just go, hey, await res.json. Let's rename this to JSON. And now we want to redirect if it's successful. So let's go if res.ok, then we'll redirect, and this is going to come from next/navigation. And if it's successful, we'll redirect to /login. And that looks pretty good. So now let's hook this up to our form. And to do that, you just go action is equal to, and then the function, which is called signup. And this should work. So let's actually log this JSON, and then we'll try it out. Let's go to our page. I'm on the sign up page. I'll enter an email, and then I'll do a password that doesn't meet the criteria and hit sign up. And we get a 200 back. But if we look at the response, it says, hey, invalid email or password, and it didn't redirect us. So now if I put one that does work, you can see that it redirected us to login, and it should be saved in our database. So let's check it out. So we go back, refresh, and now we got a user with email and password, and that's the hashed version. All right, so now here's where things get a little tricky. How do we display our error message on our page? And to do that, I'm back in the documentation, and I'm going to go to this server-side error handling down here. And I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and we have to use this use form state hook. And in order to do that, we have to make it a client component. So let's start with that. Let's copy this. We'll go to our sign up page right here and put use client at the top. And now it's going to yell at us. It's going to say, hey, you can't use a use server in a use client. So to get around that, we have to move this function to a separate file. So let's create one called signupaction.tsx. And then I'm going to copy over this whole function. And I'm going to import redirect again. And then I'm going to export default this. And just rename it to match the file name. And then we have to move this use server up to the very top. And then we can go back here. And now we're ready to use that hook. So let's go back to the docs and copy the line right here. I'll paste it at the top. So this first argument is going to be what's returned. And the second one is going to be the action. And then over here, we got to import use form state. First argument is going to be our action. So we call it our sign up action. And the second one is going to be the initial state. So by default, we're not going to have an error message. So I'll just put an empty, actually, let's go undefined. And then down here, instead of putting sign up here, we got to put the form action. And we're going to get some errors. It says, hey, wrong arguments over here. So now when you're using it with the hook, the first argument over here is going to be current state. And I'll just set that equal to any. And then we actually want to return the error message in here. So over here, let's go, hey, this is going to return a string, a promise string. And then we actually got to return it down here. So if the request is not okay, then we'll return JSON.error, and that's what our API route sends back. There we go. We can go back here, and now we should be able to use that error message right here. So I'm actually going to rename this to error. We'll go, hey, if there's an error, let's display it. And let's try this out. Let's go back. I'll go to my sign up route, and I'll enter a random email, and I'll leave the password empty. It submits, and we get, hey, invalid email or password. And then I do enter some good details, and it goes through and redirects me to login. All right, so now we're going to use a lot of the same concepts over in our login API route. So let's go over to that file, and let's just map out what we're going to do. So we got to extract data sent in, validate the data, and then we want to look up the user, and then compare passwords. And then if they're correct, we want to create JWT token and respond with it. So these first two parts are going to be exactly the same as our sign up. So we can actually just copy all the code. So all of this. And then we have to remember to put the argument. So let's copy this stuff right here. All right, so we're reading the request body, getting the email and password, and then we're going to validate it. So we have to import our validate functions that we created. And then if it's not valid, we say, hey, invalid email or password. And then if it is valid, we want to see if there's a user with this email. So let's look up the user. And to do that, it's going to be prisma.user. And this time we're going to do find first. And it's going to get an argument object where we're going to look for the user where email is equal to the email we sent in. So we have to await on this, and we'll assign this to a variable called user. And now if there's no user, we want to send the same error. So let's copy this right here and go if no user, then say invalid username or password, and send the 400 status. If there is a user, we need to see if the password they sent in matches the hash saved on the user. So let's go back to the bcrypt docs to see how to do that. And they have an example right here. So let's copy it. And we'll assign this to a variable called correct password. I guess is correct password is a little better. So is correct password is equal to, and we got to import bcrypt. So let's just copy it from here. And what are we comparing? We're comparing the password they sent in, which we have stored under password, and the hash, which is saved on the user as user.password. All right, so if those match, we'll have true right here. And if not, we want to send an error message. So let's just copy this, and we'll go if not is correct password, then send that error. And now down here, we're ready to create our JWT token. So we're going to be using Jose for that. Let's go to the documentation, scroll down a little bit. Here's how you import it. So let's copy that. We'll import it and then go back, and let's see, we want to assign a JWT token. So let's see how to do that. Here's an example. So let's copy all this and we'll paste it in right here. So we need a secret key that we're going to use to encode and decode it. So we'll set this to an environment variable. Let's go to our .env. I'll just call it JWT secret, and we'll make it equal to some secret string that only we know. And then we'll go back, and now instead of this hard-coded string, we'll paste in our environment variable, process.env.jwt secret. We'll leave the algorithm as is, and then down here, I don't care about this earn stuff, so I'll get rid of that. I'll leave the algorithm. I don't care about issued at. I don't really care about issuer. Don't care about audience. For expiration time, let's do 72 hours. And then we actually want to add a subject. So let's go set subject. And this is where we store the user ID that's logged in. So right here, I'll just go user.id, and it has to be a string. So toString. So this is going to create our JWT token with an expiration time and our user ID saved to it. So let's respond with that. Down here, let's just respond with token and set that equal to JWT. And there we go. We created our API route, so we're ready to hook this up now. All right, so let's hook this up to our login route now. So let's go to our login page right here. And we're going to create a separate file for the action. So let's call this login action.tsx. And then let's actually go to our sign up one and just copy everything. And then let's go in here and see what we got. We're getting the same email and password off it. And this time we're going to be sending it to API/login. It's going to be a post request. We're going to have application/JSON. We're sending in the email and password. And then we're parsing the response. And if it's okay, what do we want to do? We'll redirect to protected. And return an error if it's not good. And there's actually one other thing we need to do here. We want to set a cookie. So we're going to be storing our token within an HTTP only cookie. It's pretty much the most secure place you can put it. JWT is not the most secure authentication method, but it's the best you can do with it. So how do we do that? We can import the cookies thing from next/header. This is a function, and we want to set a cookie, and then we give it a key. So ours will be called authorization. The value is going to be the token that gets returned right here. So JSON.token. And then we want to set some additional options. So what do we want? We want secure true. So this makes it so it can only be used on HTTPS and localhost. What else do we want? We want HTTP only. That makes it so JavaScript and stuff can't access it. What else do we need? We need expires, which I actually have to copy the code. So we get the time now, and then we add 7 days. Ours is 3 days, so let's make that a 3. What else do we need? Path, we'll go just slash, so it'll work all over our site. And the last one is going to be same site. We'll set this equal to strict, and this makes it so it can't be used from a different domain, so it's more secure. So we're setting the cookie, and now let's hook this up. So let's go back here, and let's check out our sign up route again. We're going to need this guy right here. So let's paste that in, and we have to make this use client. And then we have to import this hook. And instead of sign up action, we're putting our login action. And why is it not importing it? Let's go back here. I forgot to rename it. So let's rename this to login action. Let's try again. There we go. And what else did we do? Let me check out sign up again. I think that's pretty much it. So we can just display it. So let's copy that. We'll go back here. And we'll go, hey, the action for this form is going to be form action. And if there's an error, we want to display it. And then let's try this out. So let's go back. We're at login, and I'll put in my username and password. I think I did robbie@gmail.com. I can't remember. I'll put the wrong password. I get the error message, and then I put the right one. And I get redirected to protected. All right, so now to protect this route, we're going to use NextJS middleware. And basically in the middleware, we're going to check for the cookie and then validate it. And if not, we'll redirect them. So here's how you do middleware. You create a file called middleware.ts at the same level as the app folder. And then they give us an example down here. So let's copy the example. And we'll go back here. We're going to create a file in the source directory called middleware.ts. And then paste in the example and take a look at it. So down here is our matcher. This is where our middleware is going to run. So we want ours to run on /protected. And we'll also include any path that comes after that. And then up here is the middleware function. So what do we want to do up here? We want to check for cookie. And then validate it. And then that's it. If it's not good, we'll redirect them. So let's try this. So how do we get the cookie? It's going to be cookies again from next/header. It's a function, and we want to get, and then we just put the name of our cookie, which was authorization. We'll assign this to a variable called cookie, and then we'll go, hey, if there's no cookie, then we want to redirect them to the login page. And then if there is a cookie, we got to validate it. So let's see how to do that. So this time we want this guy up here. And they give us an example down here. So let's copy all this. We'll just paste it in. And then our secret is an environment variable. So let's go process.env dot, and ours was JWT secret. And then our JWT token is the cookie.value. Like that. And then I don't care about the header, but I do want the payload. So we have to make this an async function so we can use await. So let's go up here, async. And we got to import Jose. So let's go back to the docs and see how you import it again. Right here. All right, and then I don't care about this stuff. And this is going to throw an error if it can't decrypt it. So let's actually catch that error. So let's go, whoops. Let's go, hey, let's try to decrypt this JWT token. And if it fails, let's catch the error. And let's just redirect them to login. And then if it does work, let's just console.log the payload so we can see it. And let's try this out. So let's go back here. I'm on protected. I refresh. I can see it. Let's check console. And I can see the payload right here. We got the expiration time. And we got the user ID right there. So now if I clear my cookies where that authorization cookie is stored, and then I refresh, I'm going to get booted out and it's going to tell me to log in. So I can log in again, I get the protected, I can refresh, it works. And there we go, we just implemented middleware. And then one last thing you're going to want to be able to do is display different stuff depending on whether the user is logged in or not. So for example, say we had a navigation menu, and if they're logged in, we just want to display dashboard. And if they're not, we want to display sign up and login. So how can we do that? Let's go to the component I built right here. So it's just a nav with some links. And what we can do is just check for that cookie. So we can go const is logged in is equal to cookies.get authorization. So cookies is a function .get authorization. And then if that exists, they're logged in. If it doesn't, they're not logged in. So let's implement that down here. Let's go is logged in question mark. Well, if they are logged in, then we just want to display this dashboard link. And if they're not, we want to display these two links down here. Save that. So now we get, hey, dashboard when I'm logged in. And if I clear my cookies and log out, now I get sign up and login. So easy as that. And there you have it, NextJS authentication with server actions. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. This one took a lot of takes and it took a long time to make this video, so I'd really appreciate it. Leave a comment, let me know what's up, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace!